Tēnā koutou katoa, welcome along and thank you very much for joining our virtual presentation of completing district one district, Central Otago. If you don't know me, my name's Tim Cadogan, I'm the Mayor of this district, and Wayne, my left-hand man on this occasion, right here to push the buttons and make the magic happen. Part of that magic we'll be hearing from you at the end of this presentation, what your questions and concerns and so forth comments are about districtisation, whether we should go ahead with it, whether option 1, 2 or 3 that we'll get to suffice. The beauty of doing it virtually is pop your questions in as they come to you. We will answer them at the end, or I'll answer them at the end. In the live sessions, I'm having to say to people, hold on, but you can fire away because you're online. So what is districtisation? A little bit of background. We've got 4 wards in Central Otago: Cromwell, Vincent, Maniatoto and the Teviot ward. You're probably familiar with that. What you might not realise is, though, out of the 67 territorial authorities, so that's councils that aren't regional councils in the country, only 16 of them have boards for every single person in the community. So an awful lot of them don't have boards or don't have wards at all, and you can see why perhaps in some of the smaller places or in some of the cities they might not have that. Other ones have just one ward amongst an area with a lot of places with no ward. So the best example is Queenstown Lakes next door. They have a Wānaka ward, but they don't have a Queenstown ward or a Kingston ward or anything like that. So they've just got the one. I'm not saying that's good or bad, it's the way it is, but we are a bit of an outlier, being one of only, one of 16 out of 67 that are structured in the way we are. So talking about districtisation, what are we talking about? We're talking about where your money gets spent, where your rate dollar gets spent. So at the moment, 82% of all spending is already districtised at Central Otago District Council. So another way of looking at that is 82% of every rates dollar that you pay is organised, is spent, is decided around the council table, whereas 18% is decided by the various boards around the wards around the community. So 82% around the council table, 18% around the boards tables. And the question we're asking is there enough benefit to making that 82% 100 to go forward with that and make all spending decisions done around the council table or not? Things that are districtised at the moment are around the outside, with the exception of community grants in the top left-hand corner. The bits in the middle are the ones that are still controlled and managed by your community board. So museum grants, cemeteries, playgrounds, commercial property, community facilities, swimming pools, parks and reserves. So what we're asking in this consultation is, should those middle 7 items be taken out and put into the district context? When you look at the things that are districtised, there are big cost supplies. So water supply, wastewater, your environmental services, so your wheelie bins, roading, bridges, they're the things that really, really sting us and are going to sting us into the future. That's really why 82% of the spending is around the council table, because that's where the big ticket items lie. Okay, we've been here before, people. Back in 1989, 1990, we districtised roading. What that means is, I think it was basically from when we were set up, what it means is no matter where you are in Central Otago, you're going to pay the same rate, the same proportions based on the value of your property on roading as you would anywhere else. So if we were to consider, and we're not looking at it, to consider just putting our roading into the same form that we have that 18% of things like cemeteries and pools, you can see there the significant difference that would make. So the red line across around about the $2,200 mark, that's the average spent on roading over 3 years per rating unit in the district. So this is a 3-year graph. So you can see there, on average, about $2,200. But if we did it ward-based, the people of the Maniatoto would get a massive increase in their roading cost every year, around about $1,300. The people of the Teviot Valley would be about $300 worse off, and the people of Vincent and Cromwell would actually be a little bit better off. It's pretty simple. The places that have the higher population with less roads are subsidising, in effect, the other places. So the Maniatoto, massive roading network with very few people, the cost per person, if they were to maintain that just on that ward basis, would be really, really detrimental, economically unviable. And plus, when you think about it, we all gain benefit from having all those roads in the Otago. For whatever reason, be it you've gone on a road trip, you've gone to see some friends or whānau who live out that way, or the economic benefit that comes to the whole district off the farms that those roads service. Now, Three Waters is a biggie. This was distritised back in 2015. This was before I was mayor, and I wasn't a councillor then either, but I 100% supported the council in what they did. So your Three Waters, just as a way of reminder, drinking water, stormwater and wastewater, they are big ticket items. And back in 2015, the council then looked at how it was operating, which was whatever scheme you were attached to, you paid your share of the cost of that scheme. So if you're here where we are in Alexandra, you would be paying your share of the cost of the Alexandra drinking water scheme and the Alexandra wastewater scheme. If you were in Roxburgh, you'd be paying the cost of the Roxburgh scheme. And what they'd seriously disadvantaged was our smaller places like Roxburgh, like Otago, where you didn't have many people to pay the cost of the infrastructure. And the council at that stage looked and went, knowing that we had ageing infrastructure, perhaps seeing a bit of the storm on the horizon with Three Waters, maybe not all of it, but recognising that there was some big costs coming up just to replace the infrastructure we had, said if we're going to do that, it's going to have to be across the district as a whole. Now, what that caused at the time was a really brutal gear change. The number there under actual cost was the average that people were paying in their rates in 2016, once that 2015 change came in. Well, what they were paying actually in 2015, rather, in their rates in the different places. So you can see they're really expensive in Roxburgh because not many people paying for the scheme. It was really expensive in Alexandra and really expensive in Otago by comparison as well, because one of the other things that came into play was the age of your scheme, how much maintenance had been done on it. There was a whole lot of factors, but that was the cost that came out. And in 2016, once distritised, well, everyone went to $1,151. And you can see there that it caused massive impacts on people's rates. Alexandra, they were pretty happy, $385 less on average a year. Otago was really happy, $869 less. Cromwell and Pizer, nowhere near as happy. They actually took a big increase. Naseby ran fairly small decreases, and Roxburgh a really big decrease, $714 a year. And I just want you, if you would, to remember that $714 because it's quite important. Now, that's all in $2016, the difference. And that difference has actually stayed in effect, graduating up with inflation and the rising costs till this day. So the people who gained back then have continued to gain. The people who lost, Cromwell, Pizer, back then, have continued to have that extra cost on their rates as the Three Waters were distritised. So why do this now? Well, believe me, after the difficult time that we had with the rates increase and trying to lower that and some fairly heated public reaction to it, and I absolutely understand why, I could do without this. All of the councillors could do without another thing to have to deal with. But we've got really big issues in front of us. I talked about that rates rise. That's the average we had across the district, 18.3%. That's a heck of a rates rise. The average across New Zealand was 15%. We were 18.3%. But actually, in effect, because a lot of the rates increase was based in the Three Waters and in the wheelie bin space or in the waste management space, which is the towns have that by and large and not the country. Rates in our towns went up by around about 30%, which is literally unsustainable. It's a dreadful number and something that we never want to have to do again, but we're kind of stuck. There's another reason why now. That's the Cromwell Memorial Hall. What a magnificent place that's going to be. It's going to cost $45.8 million to build. Now, that's funded by land sales. Most of that money is already in the bank. There is a chunk of it that will be funded by future land sales over the next 5 years after the hall's been built. So, big chunk of money to build it. That's fine. That's sorted. But it's also a big chunk of money every year to run it. Now, around about $280 is the high-level number estimate that's been put out to say that's what it's going to cost every Cromwell ratepayer to run that hall. Now, that's a 7% increase in Cromwell rates, roughly, before anything else is even taken into account. That is a really, really big kick in the pants, basically. There's a couple of points of view on this, and I've had those couple of points of view expressed to me from different parts of the district. Some people will say, well, hang on, Cromwell Community Board decided to build this on the behest of the Cromwell community. It had nothing to do with me. I live in Patearoa. What the hell's it got to do with me? Well, I get that. But the counter argument to that is a couple of things. One, firstly, in anything but name, that could be argued that this is actually the Central Otago Event Centre rather than the Cromwell Memorial Hall. Not that I'm saying we're looking at not calling it the Cromwell Memorial Hall. I don't know. Certainly not looking at calling it the Central Otago Event Centre. I don't want to give the wrong idea. What I'm saying is we're not going to build another one. I don't think there is any chance that in the next 50 years, another one of these will be built in Alexandra or anywhere else for that matter. We're just not going to duplicate it. It is going to be the premium venue in Central Otago. And you can look at it and say, well, that's Cromwell's venue, their problem. Or you can look at it and say, we're all going to benefit a bit out of this. You know, there's going to be people coming to shows here that will travel through the Maniatoto, that will travel through the Tibet Valley. When there's a big convention there, probably the hotels and motels and restaurants in Clyde and Alexandra will take benefit. So there is that. And there's also this. This is the counter argument to saying, well, Cromwell built it, Cromwell's problem. And that's this. Remember back with the roading, how Cromwell's subsidising everybody else? And remember back with the Three Waters, how Cromwell took a $300 a year and Pizer $175 a year hit. Well, swings and roundabouts. Those are two different arguments, and they're arguments that are amongst many arguments that the councillors are going to have to wrestle with on September the 25th. But it's just something for you to keep in mind as you're thinking through, well, where's the fairness in this? Where does this sit? Okay, why else now? We're in trouble with the Three Waters, and when I say we, I mean councils right across New Zealand, right across Otago and Southland, wherever you are. I've just been to the LGNZ National Conference, and we were talking mostly Three Waters. How are we going to find the money that is needed to meet the drinking water regulations, to rebuild, fix whatever ageing infrastructure that's all coming due around about now, to deal with the effects of climate change, to deal with increased government compliance, and also to deal with just the massive increase in the cost of infrastructure. We know that we've got a mountain of cost coming our way at Central Otago for the Three Waters. What are we going to do about it? Excuse me for a moment. Okay, councils, well, there's a few ways to fund what it has to do. There's rates and debt. Now, debt, some people get a bit squeamish on debt, but actually debt's fair enough. If you look at the Lake Dunstan water supply, for instance, that's been built using debt. And through the course of the lifetime of that plant, that debt will be paid back. And everyone essentially will pay their share each year as the plant gets used. So as you, if you want to look at it this way, consume the plant, you're paying for it. So debt's not a bad thing, apart from this. The more debt you have, the more interest you have to pay. The interest goes on the rates and up go the rates. And that's one of the reasons we were in debt for the first time this year. That's one of the reasons that our rates increased. So rates and debts, one way at the moment, the primary way councils get to pay for things. We also have government grants. So New Zealand Transport Agency, Waka Kotahi, they pay 51% of our roading costs up to their maximum, not ours. We don't get to put the bill in, they pay 51. They say how much we're going to pay together and they'll pay 51% of that. We also get development contributions. So if you're going to make a subdivision, you're going to have to pay some money for the growth, to pay your part of the growth that your subdivision is causing. Fees and charges, when you go to the swimming pool, you pay $7 for a swim if you're an adult. That's a fee. If you have to get a burial plot, you know, that there's a charge for that. Go into the tip, things like that is the fees and charges. And then there's asset sales. So living here in Otago, you'll be very familiar, I'm sure, with Dunedin City Council having a long conversation and a hard conversation at the moment about whether to sell our power line, our power lines company, Aurora. That is in order to help offset rates. Auckland Airport, the shares were sold by Auckland City Council, Wellington City Council having discussions over the same thing. So there's a lot of councils at the moment around the country that are going, hey, we've got this infrastructure to build. We've got real problems here. What can we do other than rates and debt? Because of those lists I put up there, rates and debt are the only thing we've got. What can we do to help meet those costs? Well, here in Central Otago, at the moment, we don't have asset sales available to us. And you might wonder why that is. Well, this is about land holdings in Central Otago. Now, people think about council land. There's three types of council land, okay? There's reserve land. So Pioneer Park, Alpha Street Reserves, King George Playground, St John Playground, or the sports ground in Ranfurly. You know, the areas that we generally call reserves. Forget about them. They are not part of this discussion. Even though they're deemed or looked at as being council land by most people, council actually manages them generally on behalf of Crown agencies or other some sort of structure. We can't sell it, and if it was sold, we wouldn't get the benefit. So forget about reserve land. This isn't about that. Then we have freehold land. This is land that's owned by the council. A couple of examples that might spring to mind and that have been partially developed, so they're good examples. Here in Alexandra, Dunstan Park up by the Pines, developed by the Vincent Community Board, half of that's been developed. And of course, Gear Avenue in Cromwell, it's a similar story, developed by the Cromwell Community Board, and some of the funds for the Cromwell Town Hall have come from that. Then we have endowment land, and endowment land is a bit trickier. Endowment land is land that generally a long time ago was endowed, as the name suggests, to usually the borough council back then. So it might say this land is endowed for the benefit of funds of the borough of Naseby. There was a borough in Naseby back in the day. Now we've got endowment land all around the district. Our biggest piece of endowment land, or our biggest plot of endowment land, is in the Maniatoto with their farms. There is also a lot of endowment land in and around Cromwell. Okay. One thing I need to make really clear about land is community boards cannot own property. The Local Government Act, Section 53, it says that. I'm not being a lawyer, that's what it says, basically. So sometimes people go, well, that's the Cromwell Community Board land or the Vincent Community Board land. That's the way we've treated it, but it's really important to know that all council land, so the freehold or the endowment land, is owned by council, not by the boards. Now, here's where we've got ourselves in a bit of a dilemma. Our current practice, in fact, the practice we've always had, is that when land sales or the use of land within the ward happens, the proceeds go to where that land's located. So, for an example, those farms I mentioned in the Maniatoto, they are leased out and the money is being used to pay back a loan to help build the Maniatoto Hospital. So Maniatoto land, Maniatoto Hospital. The land in Dunstan Park that was developed, the profits from that, or the community board share of the profit, if I can put it that way, they're in a bucket labelled Vincent Community Board reserves, even though, again, boards can't own their own property. We've treated it as theirs. And in Cromwell, same thing, Gear Ave, industrial land that's been developed, that's gone into the pot called Cromwell Community Board and generally used to fund the town hall bill, plus some other things. The problem with that is, remember back at the start where I said you had those things in the middle that were ward problems and the things around the outside that were council costs? Well, our biggest cost drivers, particularly the three warders, because they're in the council land or they're in the council area, not in the community board area of that graph that I showed earlier on, that table I showed earlier on. We can't apply, under our current practice, we can't apply any land sales to the things that are causing the rates rises. Unlike Auckland, with selling its airport shares to pay for infrastructure, we can't sell things that belong to council in order to pay for the upcoming, or help pay for the upcoming infrastructure costs, and from there have a lesser impact on rates through the interest that we'd have to pay. Because we've always done it this way, we need to, if we're going to, have a consultation with the public to break that habit. That's what this is about. Now, under this proposal, sales of land in general could be used for the benefit of the entire district. So that's the freehold land. We can go, well, we need a thing here, we can sell some land there, there you go. The exception is the endowment land. Remember I said that it's endowed to the former borough? Well, our legal advice tells us, and it makes sense, that if the land is endowed to the Cromwell borough, or the land is endowed to the, the Naseby borough or the Ranfurly borough, that it can't be used in places away from that. But what it can be used for is for something in that former borough that would benefit the whole ward. So, for instance, if we were to use some Cromwell land to help pay for a Cromwell drinking water plant, which is something we're going to have to spend a lot of money on in the near future, then that isn't allowed under endowment. That is allowed under endowment sales if the council was to choose to do that, because Cromwell would benefit. Everyone else would as well, because those costs are districtised. But we couldn't use, if we wished to, Maniatoto land to build a wastewater treatment plant in Otago. Hope that makes sense. We also want to better align council decision-making priorities and funding as a whole, taking a whole of district view. And the reason for that is at the moment, with 4 boards with their own budgets, it's quite hard to manage the costs and the expectations of those communities. And that's been okay in the past where we haven't had debt. But now that we've got debt and those big rates rises, we need to have a bit more of an overview to go, well, look, I know you want to build this. I know you're very passionate about building this, but we're really sorry. We know that we've got these massive costs coming in Three Waters again, or in roading, things that we can't do anything about. We, the Royal We of Council, just can't afford it. And affordability. We want to have an ongoing equitable level of service across our district. We don't want some parts of our district going extremely well and others going not so well at all. I don't think it's ever going to work out perfectly even, but we want to maintain some degree of equity. Okay, I want to talk to you about the halls because we're coming very soon to what this means. You know, what's in it for me, the old adage. What's in it in terms of your rates, depending on where you are across the district. But there's a couple of things I need to clarify. In the Otago ward, there are 5 halls. That's them, beautiful, all quite old. And at the moment, there's significant sums, millions of dollars set aside in the long-term plan to repair those halls, to bring them up to earthquake standard, actually. Now, when I talk about the Otago figures in here, those halls and the cost of fixing those halls impact on the Otago cost, because if we districtise everything, and I talked about the Cromwell Hall earlier on, if we districtise everything, then the cost of fixing those halls will not just be Otago's problem, but it will be the entire Central Otago District's problem. The same as helping fund the Cromwell Hall's running costs will be Central Otago District's, everybody's problem. But there's a caveat to this, and it's in the maybe space. So this is why the numbers at the moment reflect reality, but the maybes are quite real. Number one is, realistically, is the district or the board going to spend what's probably likely to be around $5 million to bring all 5 halls up to earthquake standard, or is there going to have to be some hard decisions made? Now, what might avoid those hard decisions being made is talk out of the government at the moment that if a hall is very rarely used, instead of bringing it up to earthquake standard at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars, you put a $2 bit of paper on the front door that says, mate, if you're coming in here for badminton on Thursday night and there's an earthquake, your risk, not ours, which I think makes good sense. So if either one of those things happen, it will skew the numbers that I'm going to be talking about. Excuse me again. Try work this. Right. Also need to talk about the Teviot Valley situation, and this is about the pools. First thing to know that pools are massive drains on finances. They cost a huge amount to run. Ballpark figure, for every dollar a swimmer spends, the ratepayer spends 4 or 5. They just cost a lot of money to run, okay? Now, Central Otago District operates 3 pools. We operate a pool in Alexandra, a pool in Cromwell, and a pool in Ranfurly. We do not have anything much to do with that beautiful pool in Roxburgh. In fact, as a district, we have nothing to do with it. It is funded through the Teviot Valley Community Board to assist with its costs. Same with the Miller's Flat pool. But at the moment, the people of the Teviot Valley do not pay through the district for any pools. Now, that's going to be really important when we go through these numbers, so I'll come back to that shortly. Okay, the councillors on the 25th of September are going to be looking at 3 different options. The first one is full distritisation, so that's everything. We just go, done. Property parks, cemeteries, museums, and importantly, pools will be fully distritised. So wherever you live in Central Otago, the cost for you of operating our pools will be the same. The cost for you of operating our parks will be the same, and the cemeteries and so forth. So that's option 1. Option 2 takes into account the Teviot Valley situation. As I said, at the moment, there's 3 pools in the council area, 1 in each ward other than the Teviot. If we go with option 1, Teviot people will wind up paying to subsidise, in effect, the Alex, Ranfurly and Cromwell pools, while still having to pay for their own because it's not district owned. So that's going to make for a significant increase in the rates in the Teviot. So option 2 that has been put to council, and this was after advocacy from the Teviot Valley Community Board, is to say that the increase in costs for the Teviot, given they aren't going to have a pool paid for by the council, is so egregious that we need to actually kind of ring fence the pool situation in the Teviot, pop that over there, and then when it comes to the distritisation, that won't be part of it. But the Cromwell, Alexandra and Ranfurly pools will all operate in a mini distritised sort of setup, if you like, taking out the Teviot. And option 3 is we keep doing what we're doing. Everything continues to be funded through ward rates by the boards and status quo. Okay, what does it mean for you? If you live in Cromwell, here's the effect on your rates. And these are all roundabout numbers. They're not entirely because we don't know exactly the cost of the hall. But the effective rates, option one is going to be about $2 less a year, because the cost of operating that Cromwell Memorial Hall will be spread across the whole district. Option two, if Cheviot looks after their own pools, that's going to be $35, because simply put, the people of the Cheviot Valley won't be subsidising the other three pools. Status quo, well, it's the status quo, things stay the same. Vincent Ward, option one, Vincent's rates go up by about $38 a year, primarily because of the hall in Cromwell, but also because, remember, those halls in the Maniatoto. Now, as I said earlier on, and that also applies to Cromwell, remember I said earlier on that maybe that halls problem that we have at the moment is going to go away one way or the other. Those numbers will change, but we don't know by how much until we know what the setup is. If we wind up retaining some of those halls in the Maniatoto, well, that's what it's going to be if we maintain all the halls. If the board or the council decides to maintain some of them, not all of them, that number will be different. And if the government goes, you know what, the ones that aren't used very much, she'll be right, then it'll be different again. Option two, again, you can see the impact of Cheviot not effectively subsidising the other three pools. Option three, status quo. Maniatoto, now they look like big winners here, but again, that's because they would be paying the cost of fixing the halls at the moment. They may well, as a board, decide not to go ahead with all of them in the next LTP, or indeed, as I say, the government may come in and save the day. Don't know, but those numbers are probably inflated, but based on what we've got at the moment, that's what they are. And here's the big one, Cheviot Valley. Option one, where everything's districtised, Cheviot is going to go up $233 roughly on average a year. That is a big kick in the pants. Option two, where they just look after their own pools with a bit of help through the Cheviot Valley Community Board, they still go up a bit because that's contributing to the cost of running the Cromwell Hall and other bits and pieces and those halls in the Maniatoto. So either way, probably not that good a deal for the Cheviot, but here's the thing, particularly with that 233, because, and this is the conundrum, you will recall that the roading is subsidised. So Cheviot Valley's doing okay out of Cromwell and Vincent with the roading. And you'll recall the big reduction that the Cheviot got and has continued to have since we districtised the three waters back in 2016. So part of the thing with this districtisation is you generally, everybody gets their go. So with the three waters, whilst the cost went up for Cromwell, everyone's going to be subsidising their drinking water plant. And there is an argument that, hey, Roxburgh got a good deal back in 2016, doesn't get as good a deal this time. That swings and roundabouts. I don't know. It's part of the big deliberation that councillors are going to have come September the 25th. Okay, boy, I said it would be 20 minutes, mate. I lied. Community boards and local voice. This is really important. CODC has the most empowered community boards in the country, asterisk. And that asterisk denotes that that's just my opinion, but it's a fairly well-informed opinion. I've been mayor for 8 years. I have talked to every other mayor in the country sometime or another. And the ones that I've talked to about community boards, and they're generally the ones who have got community boards, when I tell them we operate with the boards having their own budgets of the things that we've talked about, when I tell them that the Cromwell Community Board chose to build a $45 million hall off their own bat, there is some expressions of surprise. So look, whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but I think it's important that you realise that the way we do things here in Central Otago District is way out of whack with the rest of the country. It may be that we're just a hell of a lot better than the rest of the country. I don't know. For me as mayor, it's hugely important that if districtisation goes ahead, the boards remain a strong link between our local areas and the council. And the reason for that is it's really hard to know what's going on for me as mayor in the Maniatoto as well as Stu Duncan knows, or in the Cheviot as well as Sally Fineman knows, or any of my Cromwell councillors, because I live here in Vincent. I know what's going on in Vincent better than the other places, even though I'm on a full-time wage and I try to get around as much as I can. So we need those boards to be able to feed up into the council table if districtisation goes ahead, what's going on, what's important to their people. So it's really important to me if it does happen that continues and boards continue to advocate loudly what's important for their local people, and they'll be active participants in the long-term and annual plan. They'll make submissions on council to that. And any decisions on major, in fact, I'm going to take that major projects out, any decisions in local areas will be brought to the board for input. And tomorrow at council, we've already instituted this, tomorrow at council we've got a decision about whether or not to put a disability park outside the Winds office in Alexandra. And I went, oh, hang on, we need to know what the board thinks about that. It's their award. So no, that's the way it's going to be anyway. And board chairs, we've already brought this in this year. They always have speaking rights at council. Anything comes up, they can go, hey, want to talk? They'll be first up on the agenda. And they've got to do it every 3 months, whether they want to or not. They'll continue to make grants and name roads. Consultation occurs through August. Submissions closed Saturday, the 31st of August. December, September the 25th. Wayne, have I got any questions?
Yes, you do.
Okay, what do we got?
Just,
Thank you for watching, everybody. That's a lot to take in. I hope it made sense.
yeah, got a few in.
Okay.
If digitalisation went ahead, would council respect the settlement terms agreed to by central government when they washed up and settled with Cromwell Borough at the end of the Clyde Dam construction?
Well, I think inherent in the discussion we've just had is that land that was washed up then is council land and would be looked at as part of the council pot. Without having that agreement in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it would be looked at.
Next question. If digitalisation went ahead, surely council would need, being cost prudent, to examine both the role and size of the 4 CODC community boards.
Yeah, okay. So I think what that person is saying is, if digitalisation goes ahead, is it still worth having community boards? So there's a few parts to that answer. As I've just said, I think it's hugely important that we still have community boards. They are going to need to be there if digitalisation goes ahead to argue their corner. So an example I've used as I've done this presentation around the district is, if all 4 community boards decided in the same year at the moment that they wanted to upgrade their playground, a playground in their ward at $500,000 a playground, then that's $2 million, and council might go, where are we going to find $2 million from? If distritisation happens, then they would have to come to council to advocate for why their playground is the one that needs to be done up. And it may be that we do 4 over 4 years instead of 4 in 1 year, but it's going to be for that board to advocate really strongly and effectively to the council why their playground should be first off the rank or should indeed even happen. The other one, and this is a bit of a spectre, it's a crystal ball gaze, but I think it's a fairly fair one, is I believe that there's going to be amalgamations of councils come in some shape or form. I don't know what they look like, but I believe that we will see that within the next, by the end of this decade, say. And I'd really emphasise the if, but if it's decided that CODC or what is or was CODC is going to get bigger, let's take a completely hypothetical example. Wellington decides, no, too many councils, we're going to merge Queenstown and Central Otago into one with one council. How crucially important it will be for the boards to be strong then and to have learned how to be strong and gain that institutional knowledge of how to govern at a board level through that period of time. So I think it's hugely, hugely important. Now, here's the caveat to that though. If the communities don't agree, and if distritisation goes through and the communities go, there's no point being on the community board, they don't do anything anyway, then the value proposition becomes worse, because if people don't front up for the election, and I can't help but point out that we didn't have enough people for the Cromwell Community Board under the current way we do things, the most empowered board in the country, I would say. We didn't have enough people turn up for the election. We had to have a by-election. So whether or not the boards remain relevant is actually going to largely lie in the community's hands themselves with how much they value the boards. And given that example out of Cromwell, that question has to already be asked, I'm afraid.
Next question. Those district halls, apart perhaps from the Omakau Hall, are not flash buildings. Has real consideration been given to replacing one design hall along the lines of the new hall that's been built at Luggate?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. If the answer firstly is no. We haven't looked at replacing those halls. There's going to be a real crunch decision have to be made in the next LTP, depending on what the government does with that idea that maybe we won't have to at all. But there's going to have to be a real hard conversation about, is it justified to keep all of those halls? I think, though, the point being made there as well is, why on earth do we, have different designs? Why can't we just go, here's a hall that's going to fit a town of, X, build it. Totally agree with that. And it's actually one of the things that the government, with some of the Three Waters changes that they've announced, particularly in the wastewater space, are trying to get the same into the wastewater space. If we have a national standard for wastewater, then a council can go to, two companies who make wastewater plants and say, how much is your 10,000 person wastewater plant? Instead of suddenly, we've got to design it for local conditions and whatnot. That would be much more efficient and strength to the government's arm in doing that, frankly. Has everyone else seen Pink Floyd out there, Wayne?
No.
That's good.
They're not. They might have had glimpses of it.
Okay.
But no. Next question. If a community wants to take action to benefit their community within their own resources, funds, volunteers, etc., will that need to progress through the whole CODC operational process?
Well, I don't think it will. So let's use, gosh, I'm trying to think of an example that won't get me in trouble, but off the top of my head, I'll probably go for one that will. Let's talk about museums. Now, you may well have heard the Prime Minister last week say to councils at the national conference that I was at, no more nice to haves, no more vanity projects, no more other than core services. Now, there's quite an argument as to whether museums are core services or not. Let's park that. But let's say that the government says, no, we've decided, museums are not core services. And then say that in the Teviot, because I'll pick on that one just because of the situation, the Teviot's just got its new building, marvellous, good on you, or, bought a building, it's not a new one. But if the Teviot Museum wanted to really redo the inside of the museum, at the moment they might come to the community board and the community board might go, yep, we'll come up with the money for that, that'll be fine. And then it gets rated over everybody, there'll be a consultation and eventually a decision's made. And if the decision's made to go ahead, then everybody gets rated and you don't have a choice in that example. But if we're not able to do it, or indeed we choose not to do it, it would still be available, obviously, for the museum to go, in that instance, to go and fundraise for themselves, as our preschools do, as a lot of other organisations do. So it's that catchment of things that come into the holy grail, or the what do you call it, the sacred cow of things that councils generally fund as things get tighter. And this is what the Prime Minister was prefacing at the conference, was money's running out because of the things we're having to do. So there's still room for the community to obviously fundraise for the things they want to do, a la the Roxburgh Pool, but it may well not be through the boards and through rates and so forth.
Next question. Could you please repeat the impact of distributisation on the Vincent ward?
Oh, there we go. Here's something you prepared earlier.
Let me just hang on a minute. Let me share it.
Right.
Put it up to there. All right, go.
Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yep.
So in the Vincent ward, under option 1, which is everything's distributised, rates would go up around about $38. Under option 2, where the Teviot pools are pushed off to one side, it would go up by about $55. That's the effect of the people of the Teviot Valley not supporting, not subsidising the Cromwell, Alexandra and Ranfurly pools.
Is it possible to understand the value of the endowment land in each ward? Clearly, if this land is to be shared, one of the issues is how much each ward is contributing.
Yeah, okay. Look, off the top of my head, I don't have that figure. I can say that the farms in the Maniatoto are about 700 hectares, if I remember rightly. I don't have a valuation on that. The property in the Cromwell ward is, the number that's been bandied about is 300 million if developed. And I think the other thing that needs to be said, because I've probably talked too much about the idea of selling land. Certainly, I don't think any prudent council or community board in the case that we have would simply go and bang a for sale sign on a hunk of dirt and say, knock yourself out. And that's been shown with the way that Gear Avenue and the Pines have been developed, and those cases co-developed with a developer and profit taken off once costs were split up. That would be the way to do it, or indeed potentially using some of that endowment land to leasehold so that the money comes in but the land still remains, kind of like what's happening in the Maniatoto. So we're talking a lot of money, a lot of value locked up in that land without a doubt, primarily in Cromwell and the Maniapoto, some in Vincent, very little in the Teviot ward.
Will the CODC need to sell ward land assets to fund the current 10-year plan? If so, how much value will need to come from land sales?
Yeah, not the current 10-year plan outside of what's going to be done for the Cromwell Hall. And the reason for that is that we're doing a new 10-year plan next year, new long-term plan or 10-year plan next year. And it's going to have to take into account things that really weren't in our purview 4 years ago when we did the last 10-year plan. And I particularly talk about what the government said last week, taking the 4 well-beings out of council's responsibilities. We'll no longer be responsible for the cultural, social, economic or environmental well-being of our communities, which is quite something. So we're going to have to totally relook at it. There's some things in there that are going to need to be relooked at.
That's all we've got so far.
And that's all the questions so far.
Yep.
Well, that's pretty good though.
Yeah.
How many people are online, right?
16, yes.
16, okay. Well, that's great. And of course, this will go up and be available for people to look at later on. So
I'll put it up tomorrow morning.
yeah, it'll be up tomorrow morning. So if you are one of the folk online and somebody says, oh, I wish I'd seen that, it'll be easily accessible through council website.
Yeah, and on YouTube.
And on YouTube, yeah. YouTube, that sounds pretty cool. Well, if there's no more questions, that might be it.
Yeah, I think so. Or we'll just wait a minute or two.
Wait a minute or two.
See whether anyone else wants to make a question. Who else has got a question?
Seems not.
It seems not.
All right. Well, look, thank you all very much for joining in tonight. It's been a pleasure. I think that's the 12th or 13th time I've done that presentation. And I've got, I think, the last one tomorrow night at Cromwell Lions. So thanks very much. It's been a pleasure. I quite like this format alongside the live stuff. It just enables people at their convenience and leisure to watch later on or to sit at home and be part of it. So thanks very much. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. And take care. Remember, you've got to put a submission in if you want to have your say. You can go online on the Let's Talk platform. Great, we've got another question on the Let's Talk platform. One thing about that is I've had a couple of people say, look, I can't be bothered shagging around, filling in the registration form, which you only have to do once if you remember your password. The thing is this. 2 things. When we as councillors get given the information at the end of a consultation, we're able to see the demographics. So this many people from the Maniapoto felt this and this. This many people from Cromwell felt this and this. Potentially even their demographics in terms of their age as well. That's kind of useful in the decision-making process. But that isn't the main reason we do it. The main reason we do it is this, and it may come as a surprise to you, that on some things where we don't have to make people, or where we don't make people register and enrol, sometimes people put a whole lot of their opinions in, they put in more than one. Good luck to them, I suppose, might be one theory, but it really can distort what we're getting out of it. So we ask people to take that little bit of time just to register. Another question?
There was one further question. What is the anticipated salary increase for councillors and staff in this financial year? I can answer one of those.
Can you?
Yes.
Off you go.
I don't know about staff.
No.
But I can't answer that. But I can answer about councillors. It's already happened. We got the determination on the 1st of July. The Remuneration Authority takes care of those things and tells us what you will be paid, and then we pay it. And that's pretty much it. So that's publicly available information. You can just go on the Remuneration Authority website and you can look at the determination for all local body elected members around the country. There's just a big list of people, and it was also in our July agenda.
Right.
We took a report to council on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are under the misunderstanding that councillors and community board members, and indeed myself, have a salary set by ourselves, and that's not the case. As Wayne says, an organisation called the Remuneration Authority, which is chaired by Dame Fran Wild, They make the determination, and there's a number of factors that come into play. Population's a big part of it, the size of your district, the amount of assets you have, deprivation, and the role that you play. So in terms of a mayor, you get worked out on those figures, here's how much you get. And then in terms of the council, a pool is made for council, and community board, I think, is set. If I remember rightly?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So a pool set for councillors, so people who have extra responsibility should the council wish can get paid a bit more. So that's how we get paid.
Yep.
That it?
Yep.
Alrighty.
That's it. No.
Yep.
They're all coming in.
Ah, cool. Righto.
How many people? Answer one of the questions. How many people on the Zoom? Currently, I can see 16. Sometimes it's a bit hit or miss.
Okay.
That number. So 16-ish, but could be a little more.
Yeah.
Could be a little less. One further question that's come in, so that's cool. Could land in Cromwell be made available for an accommodation complex?
Well, made available. I'm not too sure, because if we're talking the endowment land, the endowment says it must be for the benefit of borough funds. And I think, and this is I'm not a land lawyer or that sort, but it's an ex-lawyer thinking, I think funds would mean money, as opposed to the benefits that would certainly accrue from having land available for accommodation that's desperately needed. So I'd say in terms of the endowment land, no. In terms of the freehold land, yes, but it always has been, but has been decided by this council that that's not going to be a direction that's gone down anyway.
And
That's us.
that is the last one. So.
All right. In that case, thank you very much, everybody. I was going to say have a safe trip home, but that's only you and me.
Well, I'll have a safe trip home.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Remember, submit by the 31st of August.